Are we on?
We are live.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Good morning, everyone. How are you? So, Julie and I want to apologize. We've kind of been, we've taken a little break just to kind of reconfigure. And as you all know, I had a baby. She's now 4 months old. I'm really excited.
Yay.
And I'll be sharing more about her on social in the coming months. It's just, I've been soaking up all the yumminess.
As
So,
you should.
thank you. Welcome to another episode of Our Musing. You know that we like to bring you really interesting people, women specifically, that are doing amazing things, but not only that are doing amazing things, their journey to this amazing place is so inspirational. And I think that oftentimes we stop thinking about these things at the summit. And very rarely do we stop and look at our sisters and say, how did you get there? Because, right, I think the journey is so similar for all of us, very different. Obviously, I think we all have different obstacles and hurdles to jump through. But at the end of the day, the issues, the real life issues that women as a minority in society go through are very similar, and we can all learn from each other and get inspired. So we have a very special guest today.
We
Um,
do.
we do. And Julie's
We
going to introduce her.
Yes, I'm so happy to. And I love that we're kind of coming back with you, Danielle. This is Danielle Noriega. She's a strategic partner at Bulletin on Facebook. Did I say that right? It's
Yes,
Bulletin.
Strategic Partner Manager, SPM. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And you are going to tell us your story and also shed some light on what it means to be Latinx and like share your struggle and story of kind of coming up in the corporate world, which I can't wait to dive into. So if you will, like please tell us who you are and your journey and we'll go from there.
Totally. Well, thank you both, Julie, Zulay. It's such an honor to get to talk to you today, Modern Muse family, and your mission and what you've done to really amplify the voices like across women specifically, the different lives they touch. So thank you for what you do. So the honor is mine. So thank you. So where do I kick off? Like, where do I begin in my career? I could start from the very beginning prior to even like going to
Yeah.
college. So I'm a first gen, very proud first gen Latinx. My mother is Ecuadorian, my father's Colombian. I'm here in the US. I'm from a working class family. And I wanted to be a broadcast television host. I wanted to work on Telemundo, on Univision. I was very, very proud of my culture. And I could speak in Spanish all day. I'd rather speak Spanish than English, to be quite honest with you. When I was in high school, I started covering sports, and I am very much not a sports person. So I realized that I liked broadcast, but sports was not it. When I was in college, I jumped back and forth, different internships, CNN Espanol, Us Weekly. I was even the assistant to Nancy Grace. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Wow.
So, I think that's where my calm energy kind of comes in. But it was, such an excellent learning to work with her side by side. But when I was done with school, I kind of thought, all right, well, do I want to go into, reporting? And to go into reporting, you have to go into, much smaller market. I come from a very big Latin household, Zulay knows. My dad is one of 12 siblings, and I wasn't quite ready to leave home.
Wow.
I have a huge admiration for my friends and colleagues in news who went to, South Dakota or Tennessee, but I was like, this isn't it. There's something there for me that's next. When I was in school, I had my own like little TV show. It was called Latinos Unidos, and I was covering like the Venezuelan uprising. And I put it up on Daily Motion, and I saw that a lot of my audience was coming from Venezuela, and they were like, "Thank you for covering this." And I was like, "Oh, I'm just in my college dorm room, like not really doing like I didn't think I was doing anything."
Wait, let me ask you really quick. Did you start that all on your own?
Yeah, I did that on my own. And I had a friend kind of figure out, like the tripod and this, that, the other. Like, so I had my friend with me that to this day, we still always like collaborate and work together. But I was
amazing.
So I was covering that. And I thought, if I'm reaching an audience in Venezuela, being here in New Jersey, maybe I should go into tech. And that's when Facebook happened. And that was the next jump in my career.
Okay.
I have, Julie, do you have a question?
Go ahead. I have so many, but go ahead.
I read through all the stuff you sent us, and we have a very similar upbringing as it pertains to, you and your mom's relationship, just even how you felt internally through all of this growth, right, that you inevitably had to go through to get to where you are today. I want to ask you this because it's so important for our Latin generation to understand how hard it is to be a trailblazer as a Latina woman. You have a lot of pressure to be an example for the younger generation, while at the same time maintaining a level now because now you've risen to a certain place and you kind of have to maintain that for the elders. Because I know what that's like. I know what it's like to have like my little cousins like, oh, I like what Zulay's doing, and they all have, my cousin Michelle went to Rutgers for film. There's a bunch of them that are like now my your cousin, your niece, or what Lexi is
Yes,
is
Jesse's
now
yeah.
pursuing a career in media as well. So you see how you've inspired a younger generation, but it comes with a toll and a lot of pressure. And how do you manage that kind of pressure? How do you advocate for yourself? How do you hold space for yourself to grow at your own pace while still being this trailblazer?
Yeah. I mean, I completely hear you. I have cousins still in Ecuador. I have cousins here in the US. Everybody has their own career path in life. That is my belief, right? It doesn't matter if you go to school or if you don't, like whatever it is that your goals are, as long as you do it and you're passionate about it, it fulfills you, makes you happy. For me, I had the pressure that my mother came here to the US at 22. And I mentioned in like one of the clippings that I sent you that 22 is when I was hired at Facebook. And my mother was an immigrant with no papers, didn't speak the language. And I always put our lives together, like what that looks like. And I kind of carry that with me. Like, she had these sacrifices. She did all these things, like keep pushing and carrying that legacy. And creating that space, I mean, I still don't feel as much as the great things I've done and worked with and seen, I don't quite feel like I'm right where I want to be just yet. So that space in the back of so it's just like, I don't know if that space is quite there for me just yet. I try to take time for myself. Like, I don't know if this TMI, but I go to therapy, I try to meditate, I do little things like that to just kind of take time for myself. But
at Modern Muse, by the way. So we appreciate the authenticity, and because a lot of people see those things as taboo. It's like, oh, you have to go to therapy. Well, yeah, I think therapy is very helpful. It helps me, and you should probably try it because it's a taboo kind of world to some people, not to us. But yeah,
absolutely, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Julie.
Can I ask you a question that's going to sound very silly? However, Zulay and I were talking about it before we jumped on, and I think you might be the expert that could actually clarify to those of us and people listening who are behind the curve as well. Like, what does Latinx? How do you define that term?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I wasn't exposed to the term Latinx maybe until up until a year or two ago. I used to identify as Latina, Hispanic, and then to be Latinx is to be inclusive, right? Of all, genders, going beyond the norms, what that looks like. And as long as I'm being inclusive and including everybody that I can within my dialogue, I think that's important. So for me, it was a little bit like, I don't know what that is. I've never heard of it. It sounds like, it's very like Americanized, but I think it's important. It kind of gets the message across. Okay. So for me, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense. I was like kind of saying it was Latina or Latino, and Latinx is just the new improved version of being inclusive.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so as a Latinx generation, how has that been growing in the corporate ladder at a place like Facebook? Like, I'm sure you've had to face some things that other people don't have to.
Yeah. So Facebook was my first job right out of college, and I was 22. Right, I'm 29. I turned 29 a day ago.
But you have the same birthday as my daughter.
Oh yeah, like Scorpios, I love it. Yes. So I started out at only 22, being first gen, being in an environment where, you don't know what the norms are. I had never been exposed to I'm very proud of where I'm from and, who my parents are and how much they were, how much they put into my career, into my education. But I had never met somebody who had went to Harvard. I had never met somebody who, went to these really prestigious schools, or their parents were, these really well-known politicians or millionaires, right? And it was just I was never intimidated by it, but I was like, okay, we're in the same space. Like, I must have done something right that we're now in the same room together. But, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know what that word means. And I used to feel like really embarrassed if I didn't know something or to even speak up. And I was so concerned about, what, making my colleagues happy or, ensuring that they felt, that I was good or whatever. And then I realized, my colleagues aren't the ones paying me. I have to represent for myself and I have to push that forward. And I think after a while, even going back to the example of, I don't know what you're saying, or I don't know what that word means. I'll tell
It's
you to your
okay.
face, Julie, I don't know what you're saying. Can you just speak to me normal? So
Right.
I have
something
something.
a little more firmer.
I
Yeah.
have a follow-up question to that because I recently found out or started understanding this notion, not notion or idea, this fact of our society called sonic racism. Do you think that your feelings around your lack of being articulate in certain rooms, do you think that had more to do with um, the fact that our society by default tells us that white is the way to go, or that sounding articulate means you sound white? Did that because I now that I know about this, sometimes I think I've been thinking about that a lot, and I'm like, you know what, maybe there have been times where I'm like, you kind of, or people would say to me, why do you sound so white, or the other way around, it's like, well, I have to sound a certain way around a certain group of people to even so that I can feel like or to let them know that I'm on their level. How did you navigate around that? Because that's a real thing. It's fed to us in a very small and indirect way, but it's there. The default voice of media is by default white.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting because when I was exposed to this environment, a lot of those insecurities, I think I almost brought it on myself. It's like I was creating this narrative that, I don't sound smart or I don't sound right because somebody
Right.
used the word, ad
Whatever.
hoc and
Yeah.
like whatever that word is, right? But it's interesting because I felt that more in other circles as opposed to at Facebook. I've been very fortunate in that sense where it's a very inclusive, diverse environment. But outside, when I've met other Latinos, for example, that weren't quite raised like me, where my mother said you have to speak Spanish at home, that's your first language. Even where I grew up, the high school I went to, everybody was talking in Spanish in the hallways and nobody thought that was weird. We knew who Don Francisco was, we knew all these things. But then when I would meet other Latinos who grew up a little bit differently, they'd be like, well, why do you talk like that? Why do you talk with your hands? Why do you say this? Why that? And, and they would use certain terms that were, degrading and they were rude. And, and it makes you, I would see it when I would be dating sometimes or even with friends or like certain things like that, where that's where I particularly felt it. But within the Facebook space, it was just, I certainly hear you on that. Like unfortunately, like I know other people within the tech space outside of Facebook who have encountered that. For
Right.
myself, I've been very fortunate, and it was just a matter of kind of building that confidence around myself, putting all those insecurities away.
Right. Oh, I love
Do
that.
Yeah, speaking of like building your confidence, do you have a few tips for maybe even in a younger generation or anyone who's trying to climb the ladder, corporate or whenever they do? Do you have any simple tips to push through and get to that place of confidence?
Yeah. I say, you know what? I love to learn, and I love to learn from people with experience, people who have their feet firmly in the ground. And people love to talk about themselves, right? So it's like I love to reach out to somebody and say, hey, I want to learn about you. What did you do? Do you have tips for me? And I feel like what's an important thing is identify allies within the room and don't be scared to reach out to people because the worst they can say to you is no. And I think you have to be okay with that level of rejection. That's a separate tip. But then also identify people that are in your circle, people that are mentors, people who are willing to help you. And I've been super grateful to colleagues like Simone Oliver, who is now the editor-in-chief of Refinery 29. I consider her one of my greatest friends, and any little tip that I need, I pick up the phone or I text her and she's right there for me because we met within Facebook, and I knew that she was a person that I wanted to aspire to be like one day.
You know what I love so much about that, and it's true, is that sometimes when we start something new, we feel like we have to be the expert. And if we're not, that's when that imposter syndrome comes in because you're like, oh God, I actually don't know everything. But if you can be vulnerable and, like you said, learn from people and ask them, that breaks down the barrier.
You have to
Absolutely,
be
yeah.
vulnerable. Yeah. I mean, I love what you just said, Julie, because it's so true. You're only hurting yourself by not opening up and communicating truthfully in the moment how you're feeling. I mean, like you said, there are people, if you look and you pay attention, there are people that reach out in subtle ways. They, there's a smile in the room, there's someone that says, or they'll offer it. You just have to be open to surrendering to the moment and allowing yourself to, like Julie said, be vulnerable. Um, I was going to see something, and it was so important to me. Oh, to us, Julie, mental health. We already talked about that, but how do you prioritize mental health? How do you balance it between work and our culture, where prioritizing family is kind of what's been embedded into our psyche from the day that we were born?
Yeah. No, of course, family is always number one. But for me to be present and to be the best daughter, to be the best sister, I have to prioritize my mental health. And I've explained this to my parents before, where I feel like at first they were kind of like, damn, what are you talking about? And then over time, they kind of gradually kind of saw that, I think, my growth, right? Where, if I have to take an hour out of my day once a week just to talk to somebody and to vent about whatever it is that's happening, it doesn't have to be big or small. And they're my secrets lie or whatever it is, that's good. I'm able to be present with my mom. Whatever issue that I thought I was creating in my head, even that issue around me feeling like I wasn't articulate. I remember going to therapy saying, I feel so insecure about the way I speak. I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm shy. I don't know what to do. And they kind of helped me gradually get over that. So now, when my mother brings her friends around even or does anything, I'm present. I'm now in the moment and I don't feel that embarrassment anymore. So I feel like they've kind of recognized that. And I also come from parents who are, I'm very fortunate in the sense my parents are very open-minded. So they completely get it. They completely get that you need to create space and time for yourself, whether that's exercise, whether that's time with your friends. So I've been very fortunate in that sense. So creating that balance wasn't too hard. I think it was more on me to push myself to finally be like, maybe I should talk to somebody, or maybe I should look at this activity to kind of focus my energy on, or I'm with my mom and I'm not really talking. I need to do something about that. So
beautifully said. It's that those time outs allow you to be back in, right? And we forget it all of the time because of the pressures of family or work or whatever. But it's like, no, I need to take this time for myself. And then it's like magic happens, being present.
Absolutely.
Oh, I can't hear you, Z.
There I am. Can you guys hear me? I think I have my baby, so I'm like, trying to be respectful of all.
Yeah.
I think what is pretty evident to me, and I don't know, maybe Julie, if you agree with me, that these are all the reasons, everything we've talked about is why you've become such an advocate, or you've made it a part of your mission to kind of, advocate for women that are coming up in similar situations or may have the same fears. Why did you choose that as a part of your mission? Because you could have just said, I'm going to go and I'm going to climb this, this corporate ladder and do my thing and be this trailblazer. But that's actually really beautiful of you to say, hey, I want to make part of my existence here within this ecosystem, and I'm going to take some time out for these women that I know are coming up with the same issues that I'm having. And that's very giving. That's what we should all be doing. But I want to ask you two things. What was the driving force for that? And two, how are you doing that within your organization? And if you do anything outside in your personal life, how do you reach back and give back?
Yeah, I think for me, from the beginning of my career, women have always shaped it, especially women of color. Of course, starting from my mom, but then even at Rutgers, Tasha Tharrington, if she sees this, she kind of started out my career. She believed in me in work in broadcast media. Nancy Grace, who also kind of took a chance on me. I was only, I think, like 19 when I met her, and I was, stuffing her bags down. She wrote my law school recommendation letter. We're still friendly to this day. There's Jennifer Jenkins, who I've worked with in this space. And a lot of these women have just really believed in me and taken a chance on me. And for me, that's just super important that I do the same, especially me as a Latinx woman, seeing that there's not a lot of Latinas in our space either. What can I do about that? And again, it's so bizarre to me when I meet somebody who is Latina or Latinx and they're like, oh, I don't really know that, or I don't really get it. And I'm like, what do you mean? You should be so proud of where you're from. We have such an engaged audience, you know. Zulay, I'll give you an example. My mother has met you once or twice. You would think you guys are pals. You would think you're best friends. You know, the way we are, our community, we're so with each other. And within like the tech space and Facebook, you know, I've mentored other people who are coming up who started out, for example, as like contractors at Facebook. I started out as a contractor and eventually I became a full-time employee, you know, and teaching them like, this is the pathway that you do it, or internally advocating, saying you should really take a chance on this person. They're really great at this. They may not have the experience, but these are the things that they care about. And this is their, you know, their game plan for it to succeed. Wow. Volunteer work outside as well. I work with the Family Aid and Services here in New Jersey, where it works with teen mothers specifically. I think of my mother having my sister at 18 and then coming to the US, you know, on her own. And I have a great, you know, sympathy and empathy for these young women who want to push forward, and you know, society looks down on whatever choices they made, and that, you know, that doesn't make you less of a person. I think that we should all have those opportunities. So I work with them mentoring and providing like diapers and toiletries and like things like that. But whether inside
I'm so
tech,
inspired by you. It's so inspiring. And I just want to tell you before we jump off this phone, if there's anything that I can do or anything that I can align with. I mean, I love all the community work that you're just doing outside of the social your workplace. So we should talk more about that because I would love to partner up with you on some of those efforts that you're doing in the community. Lastly, and this is, I mean, and I know Julie might have.
Wait. I have a very important question because I feel like we have this inside track to Facebook. So you work on Bulletin, which is kind of a new platform with Facebook.
Yeah.
What is it?
Totally,
and what do we need to know?
Bulletin at Facebook is the new newsletter platform that launched earlier this summer, where we work with a number of creators across news, entertainment, sports, and they have their own newsletters. And they talk about the things that they're really experts in. And I think that's the beauty of it. You have Maria Celeste, who talks about, you know, she was a Telemundo anchor, and she talks about her perspective on things. It's called Así lo veo, bulletin.com. We have Carla Welch, stylist to Justin Bieber, and Tracy Ellis Ross, and a number of other people. And, you know, she's there to talk about the work she does, you know, her day-to-day behind the scenes, but also creating community around the Period Company. We also have so many other fantastic creators. Arisha Kesh, I could go on and on. Hillary Kerr, founder of Who What Where. Really fantastic group of people here to, you know, kind of elevate the voices within their space, talk about the things that excites them. And it's just wonderful to kind of get that direct POV and that direct connection that we kind of crave so much now, especially in this kind of.
Oh, I'd love to be a part of that.
How do we access that? Is it just facebook.com bulletin? Like what is?
So, yeah, of course. So you go to bulletin.com and you'll see a whole list of creators across, you know, the topics you may care about. So whether you care about food and want to connect with Nick Sharma, or whether it's fashion, again, Carla Welch, or local news in your area, you know, like the Trenton Journal, for example. So you get to go and see all the different topics and subscribe, and it's free. And our whole goal is for creators to really build their business going forward and you know, have their voices heard within the Bulletin space.
Okay, lastly for me, I was just going to say before you close out, Julie, because this is really important to me. Okay, so we all know that real change happens from the top to bottom in leadership positions. You are in a leadership position at Facebook. Do you see that there's movement inside of the corporation to kind of make those changes at higher level positions, meaning hiring more Latinx people, or just by, you know, people of color, period? Do you see conversations like that being had internally, that where you can gauge an actual, you know, I know things are changing every day, but I guess it's a two-part question. Do you see that happening internally, and what would you like to change? What shifts would you like to happen in the next couple of years within our community and in the tech world?
Totally. I mean, I started at Facebook in 2015, so I've been there a little over 6 years now. And I certainly see more people like me in the space speaking Spanish, you know, managing other kind of creators, Black, Latinx, that are really kind of elevating these voices. You have so many trailblazers within Instagram and Facebook too. I'm going to name some of them: Karen Coma, Spesidana, and they're working with, whether it's Black beauty gurus or, Latinx creators based in Miami and like what's happening there. And even internally, we have this big event called like Latinat, for example, and I got to host it and I got to interview Becky G, and then kind of we talked about how she's a creator and what she's doing in, in the Latinx space and what it means to be Latina. And we have teams led by Jennifer Jenkins, Michelle Mitchell, who are determined to ensure that Black and Latinx voices are being amplified and creating programming across, these different cohorts. So it's really exciting to see that involvement. And again, I want to stress, early on in my career, I always felt welcomed, and I immediately fell in love with the company, and I wouldn't have been here that long if that weren't the case. So in terms of change, I mean, it's going to continue, and it's going to continue building. And I'm excited to see that, go forth and continue to see these diverse voices within these spaces. So I'm excited for the future, if anything.
Amazing. Danielle, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I could keep talking to you and hearing your story and your advice forever, but thank you for joining us on Modern Muse. We're so excited to feature you, and we'll keep checking in. I want to hear, what's new with Facebook, if there's anything going on there, whatever you're working on, however we can support, we would love to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Julie, Zulay, thank you so much. It's been an honor, and I could chat with you all day as well. So please let me know how we can continue.
Zulay, you're muted again.
You're muted. I'm sorry. I was just saying that.
Got her baby mute button on.
You're a beautiful example of what widening the screen of our life. Usually you see little vignettes of people here and there, but you are like, you shared a lot of yourself from your beginnings to where you are now to where you want to go. And I'm very, very grateful to you for being so vulnerable and for coming on our platform. I want to support you in any way, and we will for sure stay in contact, and we'll talk more about this, and we're making change together.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you for tuning in. We love you so much. Julie and I have a lot of great content coming up. We have, amazing interviews that we're preparing for you guys. Thank you for tuning in to Danielle today. And where can we follow you, Danielle?
At Champagne Noriega, much to my mother's dismay. That is my name.
That is so good.
So Champagne
Noriega. So follow her, guys. Let's stay in contact. It's all love. Thank you guys so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.